Hello, young one.
Hey, bro. How's it going?
Does my night... Does... Fuck! What did you think of the Mr. Girl Dr. K video?
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with it. I'd say that, like, I like kind of Mr. Girl's content, and I have watched quite a bit of it. So, you know, to put my cards on the table, I definitely have got, obviously, you know, an anti Dr. K bias in the stuff I've done about him, and I like Mr. Girl's content. So,
sure,
you know, perhaps there's some bias is having an impact, but you know, I think overall I'm pretty impressed with what he's done and what he's put together. And yeah, I think it's a pretty damning indictment of what Dr. K's been up to.
So for me, I felt like it added no new information towards any individual that doesn't already know some, or at least a fair amount of the problems with Dr. K already going into the video. I do not feel like the people that were unaware about what Dr. K has done that might be unethical. I feel like all the people who are unaware would be left kind of wondering, like, what, or at the very least with excuses for his behavior, that I would have loved to see not be the case in that video.
Sure. I mean, I guess, you know, so the thing I'd say with that is my understanding of what Mr. Girl was trying to do is, you know, he said you need to do a more educational video about medical ethics, why they're important, and what ways that he thinks that Dr. K has breached those. And I think that it's done that personally. And there's going to be a portion of people that like Dr. K that you're probably not going to be able to reach. You know, when Trump talked about shooting someone in the middle of the street and his fans loving it, like, that's true of any big figure, I think. And there's people where you could show Dr. K, you know, posting a meme, well, I don't want to joke too much about it, but you know, he could do something egregious and his fans would still support him, right? I think that people that are maybe on the fence or don't quite understand the severity of what he's done, I think it could be quite eye-opening for those types of people. And obviously people that already don't like him are just going to have their biases reaffirmed. But I think there's people in the middle there who are going to watch it and have like further insight. And I think finally, there's a lot of stuff about Reckful in there. People are very sensitive about Reckful, rightly so in some ways, but I think it has this kind of chilling effect where people are like, you can't talk about Reckful, but when you put it plainly there to see, it's pretty fucking clear that what Dr. K did with Reckful was at best exploitative and at worst, you know, a breach of medical ethics.
I don't think that came off very well in the video, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it came off, it didn't feel like it came off that way to me. What it came off to me was just very scattered. I didn't really understand what was happening a lot of the time. What was the connection between the clips that were being made and the overarching point that was trying to be drawn? It didn't feel like it was very clear to me if I was taking up the position. Well, it felt clear to me as a person because I already saw that information, all the information he shown. The only information I didn't see was the Pokimane clip of her saying that he was her therapist. That was the only bit of information that I didn't have there. But all of the information in there I had before, but like, I feel like your average person looking at that would have been scattered. I didn't understand why he would have the bits where he would look through the APA's regulations and then talk about those regulations and stuff like that. I didn't really understand the connection between that and his point. It needed to be synthesized a lot more. I never really felt like we established how it is therapy, what he is doing. I feel like we left that up to intuition, right? Which is fine because, well, it's not like good, but it's passable if you want to convince specifically people that are already on the fence and are leaning towards Dr. K as a bad person. If you want to convince those people to go farther down the line, then that's something that you can do. But I feel like it did a disservice when it actually scattered out a lot of the pieces of the puzzle that it had in the video, but it's scattered them out all across the video when it could have synthesized it like at one specific point and been like, here's 3 different issuances. You had Byron on like 2 separate accounts or 2 separate times saying therapy with quotes, right? Which obviously indicates he is taking it as therapy. Sky Williams doing the, oh yeah, therapy thing, same vibe. And then Pokemon just straight up saying, that he's her therapist. And then with these three things, you have enough information, I think, if you synthesize it all collectively instead of spreading it out across the entire video, to be able to say that, yeah, for all intent and purposes, his clients are taking it as therapy. You know?
Sure. So the way I'd respond to that is that, like, obviously there's lots and lots of things you can lay out really, really explicitly in a video like this.
Sure.
The thing is that I think is difficult with the therapy thing, and I do kind of take on board, like, there perhaps is more that could have been done to lay it out. But what I'd say is, like, you know, there has to be a degree of, like, engagement with it to, like, have at least maybe some understanding of what therapy is. And then I think it maybe is then quite easy. This is where your intuitive point comes in. I think you can listen to the things he's saying and what he's talking about, and he's talking about medical diagnoses, and he's saying things like, I don't think you've got that, in contrast to presumably a medical professional Reckful is speaking to. There's, you know, other examples too. And I think that you know, it's fairly straightforward for someone, you know, with a passing interest in this to make those connections. But sure, I guess that I would accept that Mr. Girl, you know, could have been much more explicit in that. And I think the reason that didn't happen is because it seems like Mr. Girl intentionally took a step back from being the face of this, and he just wanted to let the professionals talk, Dr. K to say what he was saying, to point out the issues there, and not really have much of an input. So that's, I think, kind of where he went with it.
Yeah, if that was the case, then I would have done it dramatically differently. And the way that I would have done it, and the way that I would have hoped it would have been done, would have been here. Hold up, let me swap my camera so that way it's not just an infinite loop. All right. The way that I would have done it, and the way that I would have recommended that other people do it, or that he do it, would have been in the fashion of specifically him trying to get these qualified professionals to look at the interactions that they have and explicitly say that they are therapy, and that just never came out of their mouths. It felt like I also would have very much liked the prompt that he gave to the therapists, to the professionals, like the question that he asked. Here is the question, the prompt or whatever thing that I asked them, and here was their response, right? I needed to hear from the professionals, if it was a professional-centric video, this is therapy, and these are the reasons why this should and ought to count as therapy, even if he says it isn't. That needs to happen. Like, this is therapy, this is the reason why it is therapy.
I you know, I can kind of see where you're coming from, but, like, it feels like we're just saying, well, Mr. Girl should have included more, you know, and I get that aspect, but I feel like, I'm not accusing you of this necessarily, but I feel like there's this endless, constant charitability for Dr. K that is never ending from all angles. No matter what you present, no matter what you say, there's always someone that's going to go, well, you didn't quite point this out, you didn't quite point that out. And I just think, when does this end? When does this charitability towards Dr. K end?
I think it's actually very, very simple. I think it's when you lay down a line of deductive reasoning that puts him in a position where concretely professionals come to the conclusion that he is practicing in therapy. And as a result of him practicing in therapy, then you can begin criticizing his therapeutic methods. Because one of the big problems I had in Mr. Girl's video is that he was critiquing all of these methods under the assumption that it was therapy. And when it felt like we hadn't established that it concretely was therapy, or even that the people, the experts, had concretely verified that it was therapy. I think one of them, the lad with the AirPods, did, but...
Okay, I want to ask you a question.
Yep.
Can you define therapy for me in a way that includes everything that's therapy and excludes everything that isn't therapy?
No, of course I can't do that.
Right. So what method or scientific process can one engage in with a conversation to figure out whether it's therapy or not?
An appeal to those experts to be able to make their appeals to why it is therapy. That would be the point. We would appeal. If your argument is that he wanted to make a more backseated thing, couched in professionals, get the professionals to do it. To get their professional opinion, their ethical opinion, their informed opinion on why that is therapy. I'm not saying for you to explain to me what is a chair and only a chair and nothing else that isn't a chair fits that definition. What I'm saying is just explain to me why this one specific thing is a chair. That's all I'm saying. And I feel like that's pretty at least that should be, somewhat capable from these professionals. If you believe it's as clear and cut and dry as it is. And if it is, then just get them to do that. Lay it out why, and then move on with your next premise, and then lead it to the conclusion.
The challenge you've got is, the reason I say that is not because I'm, the reason I'm saying it is therapy is by its nature quite a broad term. And it's quite difficult, I think, to really nail down, this is definitely 100% therapy and I've proven it. I think that you do have to make a leap in some way, not a leap, but you have to like kind of, use your own brain somewhat to kind of figure out, right, he's talking here specifically about medical diagnoses, he's talking about specific advice that the person can engage in, like he specifically said to Reckful about getting a relationship to help with his mental health condition. Like, this is the kind of thing that I think it's pretty fair to intuit if you have a baseline understanding of what therapy is, that this is therapy. Like, if you're saying, you want it so people can be spoon-fed a bit more, fine. Maybe Mr. Go could have done that.
Well, it's not even just that it should be spoon-fed a bit more. It needs to be, at the very least, near each other. I felt like the evidence for it being therapy was all across the video, and that the point was trying to be made from minute 1 to the minute 0, when that's not at least how I typically would like to engage with an argument. It would be, I make one premise, I make an argument that leads to one premise being solidified in the viewer's mind. Then I make another argument that solidifies another premise, and another argument that solidifies, all the way up until I reach a conclusion. That would be the hope. But it felt like the evidence for it being considered therapy was scattered all across the video. It very much felt like it was a video for people that already had like most of the information and just wanted like a synthesized codex for like clips or moments in which they could reference where Dr. K was unethical. It was pretty good for that, but I genuinely think in accomplishing the task of convincing people that are either on the fence or even more favorable towards Dr. K. I think the other video that was made like 2 years ago, like with Reckful in the title, I forget what the one was made of. I think that did a better job of it because it had those professionals' opinions.
The Slush one?
Yes, I think so.
Well, the one that said that Dr. K insinuated very heavily that Dr. K is responsible in some way for Reckful's suicide. Yeah,
I think that did a better job of convincing people that Dr. K performed unethical actions than Mr. Grill's video, yeah.
Okay. I just think maybe we've got a different perspective on this because my perspective on the Slush video is that he reached way too far in the conclusions that he came to.
I don't disagree. But what I said still stands, even if you can agree with that. Well, I'm not saying you must agree with what I'm saying. What I said can still stand, which is that when convincing somebody that Dr. K was unethical, I think that video did a better job. It synthesized a lot of its arguments down to a compact moment and in series of arguments instead of laying it out across the video. I shouldn't have to see Pokimane in the last like 10 minutes or 20 minutes of Mr. Grill's video talk about how she's, he's her therapist, and I shouldn't have to see that in the last 20 minutes, and the first like 15 minutes see Sky Williams say therapy with pretty much quotes. Like, you can see that on his face that he clearly is like only saying it for legal purposes, and I shouldn't have to see Byron say therapy in quotes at like the beginning and then in the middle of it. I shouldn't have to see those at several different moments. I should see all of those put together so that way I can show the audience these people clearly take this as therapy. That's very obvious what they do. And then from there, now that we've established his clientele thinks that it's therapy, what does that mean ethically? Well, that means that ethically that we have to treat it like therapy or something like that, right? That's
where do you think they're getting the idea from that it's therapy? What's giving them that conclusion, do you think?
I think what's giving them that conclusion is their sessions come off very intuitively as therapeutic. That's what I was saying, like, at the beginning, is like, I think independently his therapy appears intuitively therapeutic.
Well, no. I'm sorry. I don't agree that it's just intuitively therapeutic. Do you think the fact that he presents himself... Well, no, because do you think the fact that he presents himself as a doctor, right,
Yeah.
and present himself as a psychiatrist. Like, do you not think his own actions, rather than it just being some random intuition, that Dr. K's own actions lead to people thinking it's therapy?
What's the difference between that and intuitively leading them to be therapeutic? I believe like the mixture of him being called Dr. K and the rhetoric being had, it just brings people to the conclusion that it's therapy. What's the difference between our statements?
The difference is, right, is that if I have a conversation with someone and they walk away and they've intuited, oh, well, that was, therapy, and I've not done anything to push that, then, I've not done anything wrong. But if I say to someone, hey, I'm a doctor, hey, I'm a psychiatrist, I'm not going to do any medical therapy with you, but what I am going to do is then end up talking about suicide attempts and all this other shit, that probes into topics and things that generally would be discussed in a therapy session, and they walk away thinking it was therapy, then I've obviously, in that situation, I think, done more wrong than just some random person talking to another random person walking away thinking it was therapy.
When I'm making the argument of, I understand the distinction here. When I'm making the argument of intuition, what I mean is at a passing glance. That's what I'm talking about. Like, intuitively, you look at it for 5 minutes and you feel like it's therapy. You don't have a
but that's not what these. Okay, that's not what these people have done though. They have engaged with someone, right, and they have spoken to them, and they have got the impression that it's therapy from Dr. K's actions. They've not just looked at it for 5 minutes. They have engaged in an action with someone, and they've come away thinking it's therapy, and that is because of what Dr. K has done, and that is the issue here.
I'm not taking away from that. I'm not saying that
right.
isn't the case. What I'm saying is that or at least by and large, 90% of people looking at what Dr. K does is going to consider it therapy. I'm not saying that he doesn't play anything into that. I'm not saying that. Right. What I'm saying is the reason why a majority of people think that it's therapy, which is true, is because it looks, smells, and acts like therapy to 90% of people that know what that word means. That's the reason why. And then from that, compounding is the material facts that it would be that he proceeds in actions that are similar to therapy, so similar that people do buy into it.
Sure. So I guess if that's the case, then like, what's the issue with Mr. I mean, I don't want to seem like I'm just defending Mr. Girl's video because
Sure.
I would accept that maybe he could have done more. But like, I guess my question to you, what is, if that's the case, and you think that most people intuitively think it's therapy, is your issue just that Mr. Girl hasn't done enough to solidify that for the 10% that don't agree or something like that?
No, I don't believe it's for the 10%. I believe it's for the vast majority. I think the vast majority of people are on Dr. K's side. I think the vast minority is people like you or me, people who are skeptical, even people who know about the Ayurvedic shit and care about the Ayurvedic shit. The vast minority of people that know about Dr. K know of that shit. I think the video could have spoken to the vast majority of people that know about Dr. K that are like think that he's like a psychology Jesus who fucking gave life to their favorite streamer and shit like that and showed a very relatable and personal way of doing about it. I think you could have convinced a lot of those people, because you got to remember there's plenty of streamers that were that way, right, who thought that and then actually were shown convincing arguments as to, oh shit, it's actually pretty, it's not the most ethical shit in the world. Usually with the Ayurvedic shit, people will do that. But I think okay.
So I was going to say, I was a bit confused because you said that like 90% of people are going to intuitively look at that and think it's therapy.
Yep.
So, if they're already halfway on board, then the video is sufficient. But then you're also saying that most people are going to be on Dr. K's side.
It's because people are going to get defensive as to whether or not it's therapy for the sake of critiquing it. Or in shit like that. You know how there's going to be people that do that, right? There's going to be people that believe that it's intuitively, it walks like therapy, it talks like therapy, but as soon as the push comes to shove, when it like they start throwing shit at Dr. K, they're going to say, oh, it's not that kind of therapy. It's not really therapy. He said it wasn't therapy, right? It looks like therapy and shit like that, but he says it's not therapy and shit like this. You need to show from professionals that, hey, guess what? It doesn't matter if he says it isn't therapy. What matters is, whether or not the client feels as though it's therapy, and then you have a moral obligation to act in accordance with that. I don't know if that is the case, but I would be amazed if it wasn't the case. But we didn't get that in the video. I didn't get the response from the professionals saying, hey, if your client believes it's therapy, then you need to do X, Y, and Z. I didn't get that in a concise point that came as a result of the facts compounded that a lot of Dr. K's clients think it's therapy. And coming after that should be, what do you do then if your clients believe it's therapy? It's just, I feel like that's a simple line there to draw.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I feel like we're kind of just like disagreeing about like the content of the video and what we think should have been there and what we think shouldn't have been there. I think that for me, the issue is that this is the endless charity that I'm talking about, that I know that Dr. K is going to get. And, this is my frustration. It just feels like we're going to be like, well, there's going to be these people and they're going to be endlessly charitable to Dr. K because he's done some good, etc., etc. And I've seen some of that already. And it's like, even if what you're saying is true and this was more clearly put across in the video, that might like convince you, someone who is a self-admitted critic and skeptic about Dr. K. But I don't even know if that would convince some of these people that are endlessly charitable.
I think for plenty of them, I think it would. I think it would convince some of these people, because I think there's plenty of people that just don't know and haven't synthesized it super well, and they need it just put plainly in front of them. I have no reason to believe that they wouldn't have their minds changed. I have no reason to believe that isn't the case.
Wow, listen, I'm sorry. I've got a personal experience dealing with this, and there's people who, who are Dr. K Sims, and even with the most clearly laid out baby brain explanation of this is nonsense pseudoscience, they still don't fucking accept it. And
as you said,
there's the example of this.
Okay, well, even as you said yourself, those are simps. What I'm referring to is primarily the people that sit by and large on the fence, that are like, yeah, he's a pretty cool dude, but it's like, he's nothing like crazy. He's not like, I'm not gonna join a Discord call with a debate streamer to debate it, right? Like, I feel like you're selecting for some of the most, vitriolic or like, agitated individuals on the issue when you're talking about you being a debate streamer who's well known for debate, and especially going hard on Dr. K, that the people that come into your Discord are going to be people that are looking for blood, obviously. So yeah, sure. I'm talking about the people that are just sitting at home, think Dr. K is a really cool dude who's helped a bunch of people. That's what I'm talking about. And those people, I think, can be swayed by a pretty succinct argument that, hey, a lot of the professionals out here think that it doesn't matter if he says that this isn't therapy. What matters is whether or not the people that he is treating think that it's therapy, and whether or not he's doing the ethical practices necessary to be able to actualize off of that, which I imagine you have to do stuff. I actually don't know the ethical guidelines on this, and that's why it would have been great to also have that come through in the video, but we just never really got it.
I guess one other thing I don't understand, I'm Mr. Gerd is speaking to me about this. If you wanted to speak to Mr. Gerd, I'm sure he'd speak to you, but I'm going to speak to him Thursday. But I need to understand this better. But I guess that, like, what would the potential legal risks and ramifications be if one of these people was to explicitly comment on what Dr. K is doing? Because clearly these people were talking broadly, and I'm wondering if there's some sort of legal consideration that is holding them back from being more direct in their criticism, and maybe there's some liability they're trying to avoid, which is understandable if it's like libel or slander or whatever it might be in the US, how they look at it that way.
There could be, but I also feel like that should have been added inside of the conversation if it was. Like, I would love to get into this topic specifically, but since I do not have the full details of the thing, I can't feel as though I can give it, or maybe for fear of libel or something, right? One of those disclaimers would be very nice to have at that point, because another thing that people were bringing up in my chat room is like, we don't know how much of the streams any of those professionals saw, and that could be very, very helpful to figuring out or to cueing in the viewer as to the level of education that these people have. Because as we both know, the first thing that people are going to say when shit like this happens is, oh, well, you need to watch this random video of this. And if you say, yeah, I've watched like a considerable amount, or I've watched this amount, right? There's, this might sway people's opinion. This might make people think more highly of your opinion. And I just think that these things, at the very least, even from an ethical position, should be disclosed. Because I also don't really like the idea of these people talking broadly about a very specific situation, talking broadly about a situation that they have very little knowledge of. It seems like the dude with the AirPods was rather knowledgeable of Dr. K, but I didn't see any of the other people or any knowledge they had specifically from their perspective. So I don't know.
So, I mean, this is very difficult to demonstrate how it's been received. It's only just come out, and there's no studies that have been done on it. But looking at the post, we're gonna talk about Reddit posting. But it seems, just on reading through some of the comments in regards to the video on the Healthy Gamer subreddit, it seems like people are like not completely against it. They're sort of like saying, and I don't know what community these people are from, presumably from the subreddit itself. But there's obviously criticisms of the video, but there's also people that are saying like, yeah, this looks pretty bad, and this needs to be addressed, etc., etc. So I just wonder if that's the case. Obviously, it doesn't prove anything as such, but maybe there's a cynicism there, and this is being a bit better received than you're thinking. I don't know.
It could be. I mean, God knows there could be. I have no idea. I'm just.
This is your take on it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. This is my take from like what I would think an average person who's a fence sitter or something might have seen. I think a lot of them are going to be lost as to what the point was. I kind of wish I went through the video with you so I could have asked where like his point was on some points, because I literally think some of the clips that he added after a point that he made, like reading through the guidelines, was incoherent. I didn't even know why he would add it. Like, it didn't make any sense to me. There were several different clips, or I don't want to say clips because that implies that like chimping, but there was segments that were that it just didn't feel like it supported any argument he was making at that time. But then later in the video, it supports some random argument being made 20 minutes later. And it was just really weird to me.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it could be that like for you personally, it missed the mark, and there was some aspects that, but like I say, I didn't really want to defend like Mr. Girl's video as such. I was just interested in discussing the broader concepts around it.
Sure.
But yeah, it wasn't quite as drama-filled as I thought it was going to be. It seems like you are, skeptical and critical of Dr. K, which, I think is appropriate. So that's good for me.
Did you think that this was like a bombshell or anything like that? Because I feel a bit lied to about the branding of this. Okay. I felt like what this was going to come out with was like going to be, documentation showing. Like, I thought this video was going to show like that the paperwork had concluded and that there was like the investigation was underway and that there was something like found that a lot of people were like on the ethics board saying that this was not above bar or something like that. Like, I was waiting, like he acted like this was a bombshell, like this was going to be a nuke.
Yeah, sure.
And I just felt I
think there was for me there were some parts I felt were damning. I think that like there certainly was a hype about it, and I can understand how like people might buy into the hype of it, because like, let's be honest, right? Mr. Girl was fucking, he was like fire, it was like he was flaming, going around the place, and these tweets he was making and stuff like that. So I think that what I liked about that personally though was that clearly he was very angry in talking about it and stuff. And whilst we might disagree on some aspects of this, I think the fact that he kind of took a step back and wasn't the forefront of it and wasn't the one making the allegations and accusations hardcore himself as such, I think that works in its favor, because it means that if you're not a fan of Mr. Girl, you can hopefully still engage with the video and get something out of it.
Yeah, you can't say it's the rambling of some obsessed, deranged moron or something like that. Yeah. You have to contend with the fact that literally any of the 4, I think, different psychologists that he had on, or was like 3, literally talked more than he did. Any of the 3 of them talked more in that video than he did. And so, like, you have to contend with that fact, right? And it's like very hard to make the argument he's some deranged Mr. Dr. K hater.
Yeah, and I think in response to the whole ethics board thing, I think the issue we've got there is like it's just a time thing. I think that the complaint has been submitted. I don't know what that even looks like, how that's processed. So that could be something that comes with time. So yeah, I mean, I think what would be more so, I guess, if I was to give a criticism there, is that Mr. Girl had his foot on the pedal, on the gas too much early on, in some of the ways he was speaking about this. I think, though, me personally, I kind of, whilst I don't think, like, I think he could have reined it in a bit, I think I get it, because I had my own experience in a smaller way with this, where I felt like I was, saying the sky's blue, and people were saying, no, it's red. And I'm like, no, it's blue. This guy's saying bullshit. And people were disagreeing and saying it's not true, and like Lance with the Surfs talked to a psychologist about my video, and the psychologist backed up some of the points that I'd made about some of the bullshit. And it's like, other validations happen too.
I want to hear that. What happened there?
Well, look, me and Lance have got a strained relationship, more so these days, since the C word discourse, and also I don't think they liked the way that I dealt with me having Mr. Girl on stream before. So, there was some unfollowings that happened on Twitter and so on. Okay.
What about the interaction you had with Mr. Girl? Did they not like?
So obviously I didn't get a full insight into it. All I know is one day Lance had stopped following me on Twitter, which is fine. I followed him. We broke bonds in that way. And I only heard this third hand, but apparently there was some comment that he made on stream that may have been referencing me, but I never really tracked it down. I didn't really, care to look at it that much. But I think it's because I had him on, and then, I basically said on Twitter, you know me, right? I was like, look, if you're going to complain about me platforming Mr. Girl, every time you do, I'm going to platform an actual paedophile or something like that. I think that he probably took issue with that. And there were some people from like Bosch's community that were shitting on me a bit, and I was like, okay. But yeah, I think that like maybe it was a bit too hot for Lance to be associated with, which is fine. But yeah, the other day, he kind of messaged me in a pleasant way and said, oh, hey, I've spoken to, a psychologist. Someone linked me the clip today. And he was just reading what the psychologist said, and it just, sort of gave some backing to some of the claims I'd made in my video. So, that was quite nice.
Sure. Would you mind going over some of the things that you think backed up your claims that psychologist said?
Yeah, so it was focused on the kind of his claims about Ayurveda.
Oh boy.
Lance, sort of gave specific timestamps and stuff. But yeah, the psychologist essentially said that it was rooted in the idea that the claims he was making about the scientific viability of Ayurveda and its use in treatment and so on, isn't really meaningfully backed up, and it's kind of somewhat of I'm paraphrasing, but it's like somewhat of a dangerous game to play, if you're using these concepts and ideas and unscientifically proven things in
did you say I feel like that's I mean, I personally feel like that's obvious, but like obviously getting somebody professional to talk about it is probably for the best, but like, did you say that like Lance thought that he was going to say, the psychologist was going to say something else? Like, I thought...
Oh, no. So, no, I don't think that's the case. I think basically what happened is he'd watched my video on stream, and he'd messaged me about it, and then he said he was going to speak to a psychologist, I can't remember the exact details. He's spoken to a psychologist, going to speak to a psychologist, and then he came on stream with what the psychologist had anonymously said. So, I'm taking it... Yeah. So I don't think it was like, I'm going to prove ChudLogic wrong. Fuck ChudLogic. It was more of a, I wanted myself just to look into this a bit more. Which, I think is fair enough. I'm a fucking idiot at the end of the day, right? So, don't take my word for anything. Back it up or whatever. But, I think that's a fair enough thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had a misunderstanding about that, but that's it's good that we cleared that up. Yeah, okay. I mean, to be honest, like, I feel like that's some shit that should have either made it to the video or been like an honorable mention in the video. Is the Ayurvedic shit? If you're gonna talk about that shit, because I think when it comes to the practice of medicine in the context that he's done it and his ethics with doing it, I think that's something that's certainly in question, is the propagation of Ayurveda.
Yeah, definitely. I think that me and Mr. Girl have obviously, like, it's not like some ploy, but we have communicated somewhat behind the scenes, and it was quite clear early on he wasn't particularly interested in discussions around Ayurveda and stuff. So I kind of went my own route with it and thought, well, he's doing that, I'm going to look into this because I'm interested in it, But yeah, I think that he had more of a focus on what he was doing.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, listen, mate. It's been a pleasure to chat. I'm sorry to chat that it wasn't a complete blood sport situation. Okay.
You know what? Fuck your chat, fuck my chat for implying that each other of us like had a really big issue or some shit with what we were saying. And then we were like, dude, fuck that, dude. There were like people in my chat room like, dude, Chud thinks that your opinion is this, and thinks your opinion is that. And I'm like, what?
I mean, you know, I thought, okay, yeah, I think you're talking about what critics are going to say, and I got it, right? It's not like, so stupid. But what drama frogs are going to drama frog, I guess.
What happens? All right.
Okay, mate. Well, it's a pleasure as always, and I'll catch you soon. Much love. Bye-bye.
Bye.